Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Monday, July the 15th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. Let's get the week off to a flying start. That requires your participation. So, if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. Which is 86-26. So a little soccer recap, I suppose. Canada came close in the bronze medal game against Uruguay. It was a 2-1 after 90 minutes, and in extra time, here comes Uruguayan superstar Luis Suarez to tie it up at 2. We lose in penalties. Suarez kind of gets lost in the shuffle when you look at the greatest strikers of all time, or certainly of a generation. You know, Messi and Ronaldo and Neymar and others. But Suarez has scored some 500 goals for club and country, one of the very best strikers of a generation. And just imagine at one point in Barcelona, he actually plays with Messi right now in Inter Miami. At one point in Barcelona, he was on the MSN up front. Messi, Neymar, Suarez. Absolutely incredible stuff. One of the great nicknames in soccer, El Pistolero, the gunman, Luis Suarez. He darkened the day for Canada, and of course Argentina went on to win in a bizarre final against Colombia, 1-0 in extra time, but Messi got hurt in the 64th minute. They eventually pulled it out, but lots of confusion at the beginning of the match and what have you. Anyway, another quick one. I imagine there was even more eyeballs than watching Canada play against Uruguay in the third place match at the Copa America. Was at the Euro finals, Spain and England. Pretty tasty matchup. England, I think it's fair to say, kind of fortunate to even be in the final, but they come up short 2-1 against the Spaniards. Spain was the best team in the tournament, and I guess England, regardless of their soccer pedigree, are going to have to wait yet another major tournament to do away with that drought that's lasted since 1966. Amazing stuff. You want to take it on? We can do it. I want to say congratulations to the members of Newfoundland rugby teams representing the province in this past weekend's Atlantics. So the U15s, 17s and 19s all won the gold medal. All champions of Atlantic Canada. So absolutely brilliant stuff. Congratulations to them. Quick hockey note. Travis Cricket from St. John's. He's making his way steadily up the ranks of a coach in the world of ice hockey. So he's currently the coach of the St. John's Sea Dogs. Last year he was the assistant coach at the World Under-18 team that captured gold medal at the World. Now he's been named the head coach of the U17 Team Canada Red. So Travis Cricket quietly making a big name for himself inside the world of hockey. All right, good for him. Congratulations, Travis. Go get him. All right, thankfully some encouraging weather in play at Lab City, in and around Lab City, as they try to continue to battle the forest fire. Apparently now it's considered a Category 1, more smouldering, less smoke and open flames. But of course the folks at Lab City have been evacuated. Wildbush remains on an evacuation watch, and thankfully the weather is cooperating. Some rain for the region today, which is absolutely great news. And of course the lower humidex, lower temperatures, the wind was blowing in a favorable direction, kind of pushed the fire back on itself, so it's kind of running out of fuel. Couple of things. So people are displaced once again. 700 people-ish are currently staying at 5 Goose Bay military base, 150 at the E.J. Broomfield Memorial Arena, and 150 at the College of the North Atlantic, and 150 at the YMCA. So big thanks once again to the folks, not only Happy Valley Goose Bay, to accommodate the evacuees, but another round of applause for the folks up there working on keeping the fires at bay. There's some 13 fires, all burning in Labrador. And I saw a couple of people thumb their nose at the fire ban that was put in place, and it wasn't because the conditions on parts of the island were really risky regarding forest fires. It's just that all the resources are up in Labrador, obviously. So hopefully the folks at Lab City, the news will continue to be favourable. One thing though, there has apparently been some emergency funding from the federal government triggered, and the Premier goes on to say that there will be compensation packages coming, and fair enough, the compensation is due. Let's see and figure out how we do it. He made reference to the kind of compensation packages that were put in place after post-tropical storm Fiona. Still think there's people on that coast who are thinking and wondering whether or not the Fiona compensation packages were paid out appropriately, the timeliness with which they were paid out. And again, if compensation is due, let's figure it out. But the issue regarding Fiona, now there was apparently some quasi-fraudulent claims put forward, but what are we compensating for exactly? Just the disruption of your day-to-day life and unable to live in your hometown and go to work and go to school. I guess school's out for summer. To go to work and have your day-to-day routine not interrupted. So what exactly is the compensation for if we don't see any significant smoke or fire damage? But anyway, apparently they're working towards it. Stick with the world of money, and had a couple of people come up to me this weekend asking about how we're going to cover the shortfall. And the reference was to a third-party insolvency monitor that has put forward a sum of $104 million plus. It's $104,074,567 for the victims of Mount Cashel. Nobody begrudges the victims to be compensated, and some compensation money may indeed go some way towards closing that dark chapter of their life. Of course, many have been scarred for life. They talk about the average payment to the claimant over $356,000. We know when there was only 100 claimants, the church estimated about $50 million would be paid out. Now there's only been 40 raised, 13 of which came from the sale of the schools owned by the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation to the province. But there's a long way from $40 million to $104 million. There's been some vague reference to insurance policies that may cover some of the shortfall. But the question will be, does that mean that it will be fully reliant on the provincial government to cover the gap? Because we're talking $60 million plus here. So, and we're already in for 13. And again, no one's saying that the victims should not be compensated, because of course they absolutely should. And this saga has been developing since 1987. But I'd like to know exactly what the plan is to come up with the $64 million shortfall that is currently in play. Let's stick with money for a moment. Not surprised that this has happened. And we do know, and we talk about the conditions at Her Majesty's Penitentiary and other prisons across the province. Now, for some people, they couldn't care less. But even if you don't, now there's a lawsuit that's been filed in Supreme Court last month by the family of Seamus Flynn. He died as a result of conditions and some apparently frequent assaults at Her Majesty's Penitentiary, and the family is taking the province to court. The province has not filed a statement of defense at this moment in time, so they're suing for damages and costs, including the cost of his funeral. But it would be nice to know exactly what even the general public and the province has to say about this. So $15 million over the course of the next 2 years, including this year, about trying to improve conditions, whether it be for the ability to get out and get a bit of fresh air. We know the issues regarding the heat and humidity and the rodents and all the rest of it, and the violence, of course. But whether it be inmates on remand, unable to meet with their returnees in a timely fashion, or these types of conditions, and this lawsuit surrounding Seamus Flynn's death, this won't be the last one. So even if you think too bad about them, they've committed the crime, I don't care about the conditions at Her Majesty's Penitentiary, even though they're all getting out, and if they come out worse than they went in, that hurts us all. Just a friendly reminder of that actual fact here. But there's not going to be the end of the lawsuit stopping with this. So the family has filed suit, and we'll see how the province puts forward a statement of defense, if and when they do, which I imagine, of course, they will have to do something on that front in the very near future. All right, and sticking with justice, and just for the broad strokes of it, if you care to comment, is I still think there's absolutely legitimate concerns being voiced, whether it be by opposition parties or members of the general public or Gordon Piercy at Allied Health Professionals, as to just really why we've given an already busy minister with critically important portfolio, that being Justice and Public Safety Minister, Government House Leader, Minister responsible for the Privacy Commissioner, and now the Interim Health Minister. And it's fine for Minister Hogan to say he has the time and the ability to juggle those portfolios, but the question that I think was very wisely asked is, even if he thinks he can do it, why are we asking him to even try? So there's really going to be some looming questions on that front. And today is Carbon Tax Rebate Day. You know what's interesting, when you hear and read polls, and I only take polls with a grain of salt for the most part, the snapshots in time, but when we talk about what the general public is aware of or not aware of, fascinatingly, I suppose a lot of this is based on people's political leanings or ideology or whichever party they support. But there's a significant swath of Canadians that don't even know they get a carbon tax rebate. Some of that has been because, the federal government kind of played kind of silly with how they label it. It was your climate action incentive payment, and people didn't even know if that was fit to eat. They saw some federal money show up in their bank account, I suppose thankful to have the money, but weren't even really sure what it was. Now the banks have been obliged to tag it as the carbon tax rebate, or the Canada carbon tax rebate. And also it can show up in your account as the CDA carbon rebate. All right. People, we can talk about the carbon tax from any angle if you see fit. Since it has been introduced, it has increased the price of gas since 2019 by 17.6 cents per litre. But here comes the rebate, and do with it as you see fit. Obviously, it's your money. There is a reduction from the amount that people were used to getting as an individual. It was once $164 quarterly. Now that's going to be lowered to $149. Why? Because that was the decision by the federal government to carve out home heating fuels from the carbon tax, and so consequently our carbon tax rebate has been reduced. So here's the numbers you can expect. For an individual, $149. For a family of four, quarterly payment of $298. Small business, apparently, of course, they were been misled about their access to Canada carbon tax rebates, but they're going to be able to get one now they're eligible, but we don't know when, we don't know how much. The concept, the big number is $2.5 billion to an estimated 600,000 eligible small businesses, but we're really not sure exactly how that's going to work. And then for folks living in rural parts of the country, especially here in the province. So we talk about a 20% bump to your payment. That's coming, but it's not coming today. It's not coming until October. There will be a retro payment, so you're going to see a double carbon tax rebate in October. But if you're in rural thinking that you've heard, I'm going to see a 20% bump, you're not going to see it yet. It won't come into action until the 1st of October of this year, but you will indeed get that retro because it is retro back to April. And if you want to take on the carbon tax in any form or fashion, and a reminder, nobody wants to have to pay more for anything. And the pain at the pump, akin to the pain at the grocery store, is all very real. My purchasing power, like yours, has diminished dramatically in the last number of years. But while we all look at what's to blame for some of the pain that we suffer, between the 1st of January and the 1st of April, when the carbon tax went up by 3 cents per litre, from January 1st to April 1st, the price of fuels went up by 30 cents. So obviously, when we're looking around as to the cause or the root of some of the pain we feel as we pull the trigger at the gas pump, probably poor choice of words given another issue we have to broach, but anyway, let's go. And I've had a bunch of families reach out worried about the status of their daycare, given the fact that so many of the daycare operators are worried about the delay in getting their operating grant. And we do know that a lady named Cindy Haley said she was going to have to shutter the doors at ABC Academy down in Flat Rock. Of course this is not good enough. And it's not exactly the same as some of the problems we see in the payroll system at the provincial government. But when we have talked about the affordability issue regarding $10 a day, accessibility, and we have families who are in their first trimester of the pregnancy putting themselves on various wait lists, well, you know the numbers. So yeah, it's fine to work towards creating spaces, but what happens if a space created is in a daycare operation where the owner is not getting the operating grant on time and consequently closes the door? So again, we've got a little bit of cart and horse kind of stuff going here on daycare, but I've heard from dozens of families that are deathly worried. And why? They point to very similar overlaps. They simply do not have one or the other, the mom or the dad, or the dad or the dad, or the mom or the mom, making enough money where one or the other can stay home. Because you know as much as I do, unless you've got a really high earner in the household, both really feel like they have to work just to keep the wolf away from the door, right? So anyway, the operating grant thing is there for your consideration. All right, another federal member of parliament representing the Liberal Party. This case is the MP for Bonavista, Bureau Trinity, that's Terence Rogers, speaking out, and for all intents and purposes, applauding the most recent decision to move from a stewardship fishery of northern cod into a commercial fishery. Talking about it's the right decision. It's a balanced approach. Huge opportunity for the inshore. Talking about the fact that the inshore will get 84% of the quota. But look, I understand why the offshore companies would be applauding this decision, because it gets them in the game. And we know where they're coming from. People will stand up for their bottom line. People will offer their rationale as to why they think this is a good idea or a bad idea. And we welcome both of those opinions here this morning. But inside the world of balance, when we're talking about a paltry additional 5,000 ton, then what balance are we actually trying to strike? it does trigger an issue regarding the type of gear used. It does trigger the offshore and international fishing companies. So what balance were we trying to strike here? So you've heard all the reasons put forward as to why people think it's a bad idea. You've also heard people on this program, including Alberto Wareham with Icewater Seafoods. You've heard Kerry Bunnell from OCI on the show. But if we hear from the members of Parliament talking about it being some sort of balance, what was the balance we were trying to strike? And inside the pittance of 5,000 additional tonne, what balance has been achieved? If you split up that 84% for the inshore harvester, they're going to get only little tiny bit more to fish. Same thing with the offshore companies. So now we brought them in this so-called balance where they get to fish very little, but it's the trigger of our NAFO obligations. It's the trigger of the allowance for the draggers to use their type of gear that they use versus the short soak time of a gill net, for instance. So Terence Rogers thinks it's a good idea. I don't think he's representative of a lot of the folks we've heard from on the inshore in particular. Just 1 second, quick sip of water. Quickly, had the Minister of Environment, Bernie Davis, on the program last week, trying to walk us through what was behind the legislative process and the experts who evaluated the some 15 appeals regarding World Energy GH2. If you heard the conversation, then you heard what you heard. What I need to know now, for those 15, the individuals and groups that put forward these appeals, all of which, of course, were rejected or denied, I asked and was told that each one of the applicants will receive a detailed email as to why their particular concerns were denied or rejected by the province. If you're one of those folks, it'd be interesting to know that you can help us understand exactly what you pointed to, hopefully some specifics about what concerns you had and what specifically the province said to justify the rejection of your appeal. If you want to take it on, we can do it. All right, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. What's this? Oh, and also in speaking with Minister Davis, brought up the Clean Harbours Initiative and saying, and they talk about it all the time, whether it be Sean Bath or what's Trevor's last name, Dave? I can't remember off the top of my head who calls on behalf of Clean Harbours. Anyway, they need some core funding. They've hauled some 100,000 tyres and a bunch of ghost gear out of the bay and the harbours around the province. And when I asked the minister about it, he says at least twice, to the best of his knowledge, and he couldn't come up with a number of how much indeed was sent to Clean Harbours Initiative. It sounds to me, and I can't speak for the minister, nor do I want to or try to, but it sounds to me like maybe there's an opportunity for Clean Harbours Initiative to get back into the funding game from the provincial government so they can keep up the good work that they do. All right. I suppose we got to talk about it. And it was the shots fired at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania over the weekend. One man is dead, 2 injured, apparently in stable condition, and of course, Donald Trump was hit. So we know people are identifying who the shooter is. It's just a young fella. And we'll talk about he was a registered Republican and whether or not he made a paltry donation to a Democratic movement, which was all to sign up youth voters. Still a lot to be fully understood. And I'm not going to try to play any games with this, but, remarkably, the Secret Service apparently had their sights and their scope set on this guy. And I don't know what the rules of engagement are, is that he had to shoot before they shot back. There was people in the crowd that were pointing at this guy slithering on a rooftop. So what is actually going on here? It's been reported as an attempted assassination. Okay. There's still lots of strange things to consider inside this. What's the Secret Service perimeter? How did he get there? Apparently his father bought this AR-15 some 6 months back. And yes, we can talk about what we know or don't know regarding who the shooter is, what motivation may be, whether or not there's a manifesto. Investigations continue. His family apparently is cooperating. But in the big scheme of things, we have arrived at a place where violence and politics are starting to be a little bit closer interwoven, unfortunately so, than they have in the past. It's going to be hard to turn back the clock on this one. Will there be retribution, retaliation? Quite likely. And I hate to say that or even to think it, but that seems like the likely scenario. And then it's even about commentary. Will we see every utterance of condemnation or criticism of Donald Trump be referred to as inciting further violence? Does this secure the election for him? These are questions. I'm not trying to make any bold statements here because there's a lot we don't really fully understand here. But this is bad. Let me just say that very short 3-letter word that I don't think can be denied. This is bad for all of us. Remember, we are not immune to that in this country. There's a fella, and the media did a horrible job covering this story, is Corey Huron, 46-year-old from Manitoba, We basically refer to him as a disgruntled sausage maker. He drove all the way from Manitoba, loaded for bear, faced some 21 weapons charges, a charge of mischief for the $100,000 of damage he did while he rammed his truck through the Rideau Hall gate. And of course, he was there to see the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wasn't there, thankfully so, but who knows what could have happened. He wasn't there to exchange pleasantries. So, as opposed to covering it the way we should have, with a potential attempt on the Prime Minister's life, no, disgruntled sausage maker. I mean, how stupid are we at all? So we have this issue right here in front of us in this country. What we all saw on the weekend, regardless of your stance on it, is absolutely deplorable for all. It's fine for others to reach out as world leaders and opposition politicians in the United States and around the country and around the world to talk about there's no place for violence. The fact of the matter is the amped up, over-the-top, hyperbolic, sensationalized rhetoric has really been an unraveling of what should be some reasonable political discourse. We can't seem to wrap our mind around trying to debate policy versus the cult of politics, the cult of personality. That's why we are where we are. So what the future holds as they head into the grand old party, the Republican convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin today, and the heightened security. So I don't have a big firm declaration to make on this front, but this is not going to be good for the course of politics here, there, and everywhere. And it's fine to say there's no room for violence in politics, but the fact of the matter is in the recent past we've seen examples of violence. And spare me the whole bit about it's the FBI behind the January 6th issue and or confrontation, because this is all leading us down a very gloomy, dark path. And whether or not you think this secures the election for Donald Trump, or it's a reason to open up genuine conversation about actual policy versus what I just said, the cult of personality, because that's where we are. Politics has far and away trumped policy. And yes, there's no room for violence. And yes, there's questions to be asked about how the Secret Service and other people were pointing at this guy, setting up shop on a rooftop, and there's 2 people injured, 1 person dead, and of course, whatever you'd like to reflect on and what this means for Donald Trump. And I've got some emails saying, I must be disappointed he's not dead. Look, I'm not a psychopath or a sociopath, so I don't cheer for people to be assassinated. I'm not cheering for people to be shot or killed, regardless of what party they represent, or what kind of person they are, or their character, or their flaws, or their policies. So please, do me a solid. Don't send me any more emails saying that I'm disappointed he's not dead, because I don't feel like that. Why? Because I'm not some weirdo. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Oh, on a pleasant note. So apparently there's going to be a statue of one of our favorite sons, Gordon Pinsent, erected out in Grand Falls, Windsor. Happy to talk about that in a effort to not go down the gloomy paths that sometimes some of the issues we broach bring us. But c'est la vie. $215,000 for the province to create and install a statue of the great Gordon Pinsent. All right, our email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin on line number 4 this morning. Take you good morning to the CEO of the Atlantic Chapter of the Chamber of Commerce. That's Rhonda Talk-Lane. Good morning, Rhonda. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. Before we jump into a little chat around temporary foreign workers, I could give a big shout out. I just was home weekend at the Salmon Fest and had a great weekend. We had our 30th high school reunion, which I can't believe it's been 30 years, but big shout out to the committee that put our reunion together and to the town for putting off some really cool events.
Yeah, great. And I mean, of course, saw lots of videos and pictures come from Bannerman Park and the Folk Fest. I know there's been other festivals and garden parties going on around the province. So hopefully everyone's had a grand time. Seems to be the case.
I hope so. I hope people are getting out, just checking out what's happening in your own backyard. There's events and music and activities and things just everywhere. So last week I know there was some discussion on, I think, student employment, and you had Minister Byrne call in Friday around the temporary foreign worker program. I just wanted to share a little bit. I had an opportunity over, I guess, the last 20 years to work a lot with student employment programs, also the temporary foreign worker program. And I think there's a lot of facts out there that people don't know. And my interest is, of course, I represent 90 chambers and over almost 16,000 employers. And a lot of the employers use this program.
Sure, let's go.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the really good things, because I think it's like any program that we look at, and anything we do, there's good and bad. There's good and bad players, right? There's good and bad lawyers, good and bad doctors, good and bad CEOs, good and bad radio broadcasters. there are employers that are involved in this program that if they don't follow the rules, they get banned. And I want to talk about all the ones that are doing good, unfortunately, kind of fall through the cracks. So I want to talk a little bit about when an employer looks to this as a solution for their temporary work. That's what it's supposed to be for, right? And when you look across Canada, you see a lot of fish processing employers, farming too. So the agriculture actually has their own temporary foreign worker program. Of course, when you think about it, it's and peak when we need to they're picking fruits or picking berries wherever in Canada. And we have actually Canada has had, and we just celebrated a 50-year program with Mexico for the temporary foreign worker program, which is pretty cool. I don't know if people know that. 50 years that program's been in place with Mexico. And they're always tweaking it. The other fact is, I think, what general public needs to know when they see employers or hear about the program is that it costs anywhere between $5,000 to $11,000 for an employer to even avail of this. And I think, as far as I know, I'll agree with Minister Byrne, there are no perks, there's no subsidies. You know, you're making a big investment when you're bringing in these temporary farm workers, and it's risky.
That's where I think the largest piece of the confusion reigns supreme here. And I have people tell me this all the time, and I've tried to say, and I've sent them all the information that I can put my fingers on, and that they say, well, if 70% of my wage is being covered by the federal government, of course I'm going to use temporary foreign workers. But the labour market assessment, and if you look at the document, it's pretty comprehensive. Now, is there the opportunity for people to find a loophole regarding the distance from which their business operates and access to a labour pool? Maybe. Are there people being sent home who are, so to speak, locally born and bred, as opposed to someone who's brought in to be a worker working alongside? Does that happen? Maybe. But I think the concept where people really get hung up is that my wage is being subsidized as a newcomer to the country. And that extends itself to a bit more of a complicated conversation about immigration, the numbers, healthcare, housing, all those types of things. So we really got to be clear about that subsidy piece.
Agree, and you're right, and know the facts. So, for example, you said all this stuff because I don't think what we are talking about is really the temporary foreign worker program. If we start peeling this back, it's a bigger piece, and that program is highly scrutinized. I was just actually taking a look. You can go on and see all the employers that didn't meet the compliance, and if they were fined, and if they were banned. So the program has the federal government has a really good process in place to deal with, as everyone's calling now, bad actors. And the good ones are continuing to use the program and see benefits for temporary workers. When we talk about summer jobs and students, the other thing I'm finding really interesting, because I've been hiring students now for 20 to 30 years, and the majority, I would say, 90% of the programs I use will not allow me to hire international students. I don't know if people know that. So I can actually only hire native Newfoundlanders and Labradorians for summer students.
Well, you have to be a citizen of Canada to get one of those Canada Summer Job Grants. So, right? I mean, I remember, and this is not to derail the conversation, but, that program got quasi-hijacked a few years ago by the federal government, asking the employers or potential employers to sign a attestation that they agreed with all the Liberal policies. Well, that's not what a wage subsidy is about. I mean, that was completely ridiculous. It cost Scott Sims his chair of the Fisheries Committee, and, of course, consequently, they kind of turned their back on Scott Sims. But the fact of the matter is, to avail of that subsidy program, you must be a citizen of the country.
Exactly. So you're not here as an international student. You're not a temporary foreign worker. So there are great programs. And just last week, I applied for a really cool program called Venture for Canada. Allows you to hire interns. It's amazing for for-profit and not-for-profit employers. Yet again, you have to be a permanent resident of Canada. So you need to, so I think there are lots of programs. There are people slipping through the cracks. I think native Newfoundlanders and Labradorians that are probably, the labor market's tight and summer jobs. I remember back in the 90s, it was hard to find a summer job. And then when I was looking for them, and then when it kind of changed where it felt like, you could get a summer job anywhere, we seem to be back in the time where now the labor market, even though you see the signs up, help wanted, I think it's still hard for these summer positions, these 8 weeks, and it's just a little bit tougher, but I still think there are many, many things in place for locals and international students that are here to find the work they need. They need to get connected, And there's so many employers out there. And I think for employers, they should get a little more specific about what kind of help do you want? When you put that sign up, help wanted, that's pretty big ask.
Well, it's also, and look, I have no interest, because I don't believe this to be true, that we have a generation of lazy, because I absolutely deny that that's the reality on the ground. But there is a question to be asked about what kind of job you're willing to take. It's one thing to want what you want when you want it, but when you're looking for a job in a tight job market, there's probably very little wiggle room for petulance to be part of the approach to it. Because like one of my young fellas who's moved to a different town while he's going to school, and he scrambled for months to try to find a job. He doesn't have the job he wants. He's working at a gas station, right? That's not what he wants to be at, but that's what he is at, because that's what he could get. So I think we can add that to the mix, and that's not to try to say that people are only willing to take high-paying, not entry-level type of jobs, because for the most part, in the world of seasonal work, unless you have a very specific relationship based on a co-op or something, those are the types of jobs that are out there.
It's so true. And how do we, if that's what is dealt with us at this time, and my little guy's just starting to enter the labor market and getting his resume and trying to figure out what skills he's got. I think the other thing is, like you said, what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? And are you willing to, how do we kind of change the conversation about those? I hate the term low skilled, because I can tell you I learned probably some of the best of my skills on the counter at A&W.
Well, it's good.
Right?
It's good training ground. You understand money. You understand dealing with the general public. You understand a bit of public speaking. You understand working as a team and working on deadlines and timelines. Look, there's a lot to be said for fast food to be a great training ground. And I bet you, plenty of employers listening, if they see that you had some commitment in the quasi long term at a fast food joint, you probably got a bunch of skills they don't need to teach you.
You do, and I don't think that younger person or the person entering the labor market, we probably need to do a better job helping them articulate their skills, because learning to deal with difficult people, that's going to exist in every single role you have, I think, for eternity. Mm-hmm. So when you're able to articulate that on a resume, and then you can present yourself better. So I think we've got some work to do in that matching piece. I know we've gone off because of temporary foreign workers, but I think it's just a huge labor market issue where the employer and the employee, we've got some work to do to find better matching so that employee knows the skills they have and the employer can really articulate what it is they're looking for. And sometimes, you do that cut and paste when you're throwing out a job ad where you put everything in, and boy, you probably lost 20 to 30% of applicants, and what you put in you didn't really need. So, I think there's some really good ways here we can improve both groups so that there's better matching, and that's going to take just supports, government programs, employers, the school system. It's going to take everyone to figure out how we're doing that. But I think there's a lot of mishaps happening between that interview stage. Also, interviews. I think there's some room to grow on how we do those to find the best suited candidate.
Yeah, I can use artificial intelligence to gin up my cover letter and my resume, but not so much when it's a face-to-face interview.
Exactly. So, I really just wanted to throw that out there, that I think for people that are feeling a little frustrated or hitting wall when they're trying to find employment, that I don't think the temporary foreign worker program is the problem. It's being tweaked constantly. It's being managed. The bad players are getting kicked out. I think we need to look at other solutions that we need to work on to find these matches, because we have a huge population not working, huge group of employers needing work, and how do we build that bridge? So lots of work to be done and lots of discussion.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that plenty of people listening here in Newfoundland and Labrador don't care what the circumstance is elsewhere, but if we don't incorporate what's the reality in other provinces, we'll never learn, we'll never be able to co-opt best practices or try to figure out messaging, because as a result of the most recent numbers from Stats Canada, we have the lowest labour participation rate for ages 15 to 24 since 1998. And that's because it's been a really difficult summer for young people to find a job, because those 8 weeks, they're okay for businesses that amp up in the summertime to help fill some of those pressures. But of course, if I have the opportunity as a business owner to hire someone who's willing to work full time, not go back to school in September, regardless of where they're from, that's pretty attractive, because it's that turnstile and the cost of training and what that really means for bottom line and how it complicates the shift in the scheduling. A full-timer is a pretty attractive option if I'm an employer, and that's not to begrudge young students, because when my boys were going to school, they wanted a summer job, and you had to scramble pretty hard to get one. I'll give you the final thoughts, Rhonda, before we have to go.
Sure. I think, again, not looking at longer-term solutions, I think if we're able to start working, as you noted that stat, between the 15-year-old to 24-year-olds being the largest right now not working. I think there needs to be some more industry and education connections back in the high school. So how we need to do that more. I look at some of our partners in the States, and their K-12 system is just really connected with the local industry. So if we could start doing that around Newfoundland and Labrador and Atlantic Canada, I think we'd see students coming out already connected and able to find some jobs quicker. So I think if we can focus on that, it'll take a little while to see those fruits, but I think it would be an excellent step for us to start figuring out solutions long-term for our labour market.
Appreciate the time this morning, Rhonda. Thank you.
Okay, Patty. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. It's Rhonda Tuck Lane, CEO of the Atlantic Chamber of Commerce. Let's take a break. When we come back, plenty of show for you. Don't go away. Welcome back. Very quickly, just regarding an email, asking if I had any update regarding that incredibly dangerous and scary story last week of road rage, where apparently, I guess there was some sort of altercation on the road. Eventually, the car that was following, the white BMW, apparently they pulled a gun of some variety and shot at the car. Apparently one of the holes or the dents or the marks caused by the shooting was about 2 centimetres below where their child would have sat in his car seat, in the back seat. So I'm trying to get an update, but I don't know. But that's particularly scary. It's one thing for someone to flip the bird, quite another to pull a gun. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Charlie, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
Paddy, a couple of quick things, but I'm not going to have time to develop them. I agree with you totally on the fishery. By the way, a balance that decision is just totally indefensible. There's no way we should have allowed access to our fishery to NAFO nations and that. To say inshore will have more, they could have used the stewardship fishery and just bumped that up. But I guess they wanted credit for doing that. I can't fathom that at all. And the other thing, sometime I'd like to mention double cropping. We ate carrots this year in the end of June, fair size too, and beets will be ready in about a week. You can get that grown then to sow more carrots or more beet if you wanted to. So you can double crop those two with. There's a little method that I tried this year that worked. Anyway, what I want to get to...
what was the method? Like just straight up intercropping?
No, the method was starting the things indoors or in a cold greenhouse,
okay. Yeah.
April, and then getting them outdoors fairly quickly. And then you can transplant and have them, as I said, as early as that. But anyway. It's
a great way to generate more product in the same land.
Yes, with small piece of land. That's right, Patty. I'd like to comment on the events in with the shooting.
Okay.
What I see is a real tragedy, and the real tragedy is children and innocents being killed by the thousands every year by guns that should not be in the hands of citizens. That young man apparently went and got his father's gun. Now, you can talk about locking it away in that, but there's easy ways around that. Why in the name of God aren't they talking about banning assault weapons? But he was using that. That's why he could be as accurate as he was at that distance. This is the real tragedy, not politicians being shot. Although that can be classed as a tragedy, I'm sure. It's innocence because of politicians that will not deal with gun control. As an example, the Supreme Court recently brought back bump stocks that you put on these guns and you make them machine guns, no difference than a machine gun. There's definitely some kind of sickness in the United States.
The bump stock is a problem. There's more guns than people in the States, way more. The bump stock is obviously a huge problem, turning a semi into an auto. But, the argument that's made, and number one, the NRA is a massive lobby group and they have politicians in their back pocket, so that's why there's no pragmatic discussion on gun control. But the reality is, the unfortunate reality is, the AR-15, which seems to be the gun of choice in some of these really serious incidents, whether it be mass shootings and or the issue in Pennsylvania this past weekend, there's plenty of weapons out there that don't look as scary, don't look as dangerous, but have the exact same capacity. So while we focus in on the gun, which I understand why we do, the fact is, if that wasn't an AR-15, and I'm not familiar with guns, I don't know much about guns, but I do know that there are other weapons that look different with the exact same capacity as an AR-15, but because they don't look like that assault weapon, they don't look like that military grade weapon, then we don't really think about them. So that's where I think we kind of miss a little bit of the point here, is the access to a gun, period, regardless of what it looks like, regardless of its AR designation or otherwise, because how people get a gun, the lack of background checks in many areas, being able to go to a gun fair, those types of things, those issues I think are every bit as important, if not a bit more important than the style of the weapon, because there's so many guns on the street that there's no, like I said, there's no putting the genie back in that particular bottle in the United States. We'll have that argument about the Second Amendment until the cows come home. But of course, the forefathers weren't considering the amount of time it took to reload their musket versus what we see available in the shops today.
Well, no matter what it looks like, if it's a weapon of war, which all those weapons are, there is no a justification whatsoever for having that in the homes of a nation. No other nation is even close to the United States. So what makes them an exception? I could get into that. Some of the reaction. Do you remember when Nancy Pelosi's husband was almost killed?
I do.
The guy, a Canadian guy, as a matter of fact, entered his house and just about plunged to death with a hammer. I don't know if you remember the reaction. Mr. Trump actually mocked that attack at some point. I don't know if you remember that, but I certainly remember it quite well. I like the reaction of Biden of calling him and his wife called Melania. If you promote violence, if you allow those guns and you promote violence and talk about blood in the streets and so on, sometimes karma can be an awfully powerful thing. Looking at history, I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler when I say this, but some assassinations that failed, they tried to kill Hitler about partway through his I think it was in the 30s, because they knew what was coming. Some of the more sensible people put a bomb in the conference room. I'm sure you remember that, and he escaped. That failed attempt changed the course of history. As a result, millions of people died after, Germans and soldiers from the West and so on, right? Anyway, I don't know where all this is going, but I'm hoping that there's some unity at least. They can look at common ground, and I'm probably dreaming when I say that. But
I think you are. That's a Technicolor dream, I think, unfortunately, Charlie. And I do think it's probably, and this not aimed at you necessarily, but I think we've all done ourselves a disservice, whether it be about the radical Marxist, globalist, socialist, and Hitler and dictator, even though there might be some truth to the dictator type of stuff. I mean, we just take his own words at face value. But I think when we invoke things like Hitler, we just sort of sidetrack what are the real nitty-gritty modern-day components that we can talk about. What do you think of that? Because I do think it's much akin to conversations regarding climate change, carbon tax. All of a sudden the conversation's over. Immigration, illegal. All of a sudden the conversation's over. Trump, Hitler, conversation over. What do you think?
Well, I don't equate. It sounds like I'm equating the two. I'm just looking at people in history. Putin, for instance. How many people worldwide would mourn the assassination of Putin, or Pol Pot in Cambodia when they killed hundreds of millions and so on? I'm just talking about assassinations generally. I'm not making the comparison, but it sounds like I did when I said that. So I apologize for that. But anyway.
You don't owe me an apology. I was just using it as a general reference with how the discourse has developed or unraveled here in the recent past. I mean, look, none of this is new. Violence in politics has been around for centuries. But when we have a so-called modern-day first world society that we're lucky enough to live in, for the life of me, I can't understand why people regardless where you are on the political spectrum, how we can't all collectively agree that that type of behaviour, and even some of the commentary, it's fine to criticise and question and condemn. That's all part and parcel. Whether it comes with freedom of expression or free speech south of the border. But when we take it a step further, and it's like child pornography, it's hard to define what it is, but you know what it is when you see it. Same thing with the type of rhetoric that we hear thrown around in the political arena. Some of it's completely out of control. Some of it's based on ignorance. Some of it's just based on emotion. Very little of it is based on policy.
Well, I just say that we're asking sometimes the wrong questions. I'm saying this, I guess, for the benefit of the audience in the States. Until they start looking more deeply what's happening to the country, this stuff is going to continue. And as I said earlier, the real tragedy is innocents that are killed for no reason, especially the young. I guess I'll leave it at that. Yeah,
well, they've averaged more than one mass murder per day this calendar year so far. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. Charlie, I appreciate your time.
Okay, sir.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
All
right, bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's keep going. Line number 4. Sam, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty Daly. How are you doing?
This morning. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, not too bad. Things could be better, things could be worse, but just day by day, and hopefully things will change in the future, so we don't know, right? I'm calling about a couple issues about the healthcare in Bay St. George, Steenville. We had an anesthesiast, Dr. Yanka Julu from Nigeria, and he was here for a few years, and all of a sudden he resigned. And now he's working, as you call, as a local. And a local means you can be working anywhere, wherever you're needed around the province. But he's only doing that, he only has the contract till December. Then he's going to be applying for other jobs in other provinces. So we lost him out of Steamville, so we don't have a replacement. And he's now working in Corner Brook or wherever. So the medical board in Steamville is responsible for his actions of what he's doing, for him to leave and probably not come back and probably leave the province altogether. So I don't think that's fair. What is the medical board going to do about it? Why are they trying to discourage doctors or make them resign or make them leave? Because we're losing doctors all the time, anesthesia specialists. Steamville here right now is just like walking in a ghost house. There's hardly any staff there. You hardly see any staff. And
Sam, just so I understand what you're saying, what is the regulator? What's the issue there? They're forcing him to.
Dr. Yanka Julu, he was the anesthesiast here in Steamville, right? He was working in Steamville. And I guess I don't know what happened between the medical board and him. It caused him to resign. You must have heard that a little while back. Dave Callahan mentioned that.
Yeah.
It caused him to resign. And so he resigned. Now he's working as a local. And what I mean by a local, he's working everywhere until December. Then after December, he's going to be applying for jobs maybe outside the province. And there's nobody here to replace him in Steamville. And they're not trying to get him back here in Steamville. So, we're going to lose him completely and probably lose him from the province completely. So, as we're losing, this is not fair, right? This is not right to lose people out of our house where we're losing people that we need. It's unbelievable.
Well, of course, and then there's other examples where there was a group of doctors, and I think we're talking about Grand Falls, Windsor at this time, talk about the lack of family doctors on the newly established healthcare clinic. They had put a proposal forward where you wouldn't be taking on full-time shifts and a full-time roster, but they were willing to try to fill the gaps. It was rejected. So if we know that doctors, take this for what it's worth, they hold a lot of the leverage here. And if they're unwilling to do what the province in the past has wanted them to do with full-time, full-patient roster, but they're willing to do something. Something's better than nothing. So I don't know why we're rejecting things. And on the world of locums, it's just too difficult, too cumbersome, too much paperwork, too much time, too much cost, and consequently, doctors and or nurses in this province and or doctors from elsewhere across the country willing to come for locum, they just say it's too much of a pain in the neck, so they just gave up on it.
Yeah, that's right. And another thing, too, my mom is in the hospital. She had an accident there a few days ago. She's got strongly extreme Parkinson's, so she can barely do anything. So she took a fall and she fractured her Phoebus bone, and she's in a lot of pain, so she can barely move. So the home care worker that looks after her checked on her in the hospital yesterday. I was there yesterday morning, yesterday afternoon. Her intravenous, for her, was leaking into the bed. Her bed was soaked. and she could have been dehydrated or could have died. Right? And they never ask if she can feed herself. She only got one hand because she's in a sling with that hand because where she broke her femur bone, right? And they didn't even ask if she could be fed or not. So she was trying to feed herself with that same hand with the intravenous and barely can do it, shaking, to feed herself. And nobody asked if she needed help. And with the intravenous as well, into the bed, leaking in the bed. So a lot of that there, the fluids, what she needed, meds, whatever was into that all went into the bed. So who was checking on her to see if that's working properly? I went there, the staff was working. It's crazy. The few people that's working there, they're so understaffed. And now it's affecting our patients. Our healthcare is feeling it. And it's going to even feel it more worse as the days go by and the weeks. People's going to die and because of lack of help and assistance that the hospital need. We need nurses. We need doctors. So, this is another example of what's going on as well.
Yeah, and I always have a hard time really with some of the big numbers that we talk about here, because the fact of the matter is the population has not grown necessarily very much, but there's more doctors, more nurses than ever before. And yet, everywhere you turn, someone's having a problem with access to a family doctor, for instance, and or empty beds in hospitals. Why? Because we don't have staff. Empty beds in long-term care facilities for the exact same reason. So they're out there. There's something that I must be missing inside that whole conversation because, and again, it doesn't seem to be about the money. Plenty of money being spent.
Well, you're still just putting all kinds of money in healthcare, but where is it going into healthcare? Where is it being diverted to? Is it going into doctors and nurses or going elsewhere? Right? Where is the money? Is it properly spent or is needed? I don't know. Because, according to the healthcare, the hospitals out there, you still get your 8 and 12-hour waits. You're looking at you're walking around in hospitals and they're filthy. You can collect dust off the because they're understaffed. It's dirty. New hospital's dirty. Steamboat Hospital's not that old. So was Gerald Smith was MHA Liberal government when he put that. He was one of the guys responsible for putting it here, the new hospital. It's dirty. So how can they have? There's not fully staffed. The population. You're talking about population here. Of course, we need economic growth here. But most of our people's gone. But now the people that's come back here to retire, to work abroad, so they've got no health care. So they're home here now. They're spending their money in the business and all that. They're retired, so they're sick and they got health problems, whatever. And there's no physicians available or nurses, or like you says, and there's no staff. Like beds, people, nobody in the beds. It's unreal. You got what, 1 or 2 doctors in emerge? For the amount of people in there. I go in there, sometimes you might be lucky, it might be empty, but most times it's full. And you should have the extra staff there. The ambulances goes in the hospital from my house, probably from about 20 years ago, you might see it pass maybe once or twice a week. Now you see it 3 or 4 times a day, just passing my house. And that's a lot compared to what it used to be. It's crazy. And I live in a small community in the Port Peninsula. And it's only between Cape St. George and Ship Cove where I live. So there's what, 20 kilometers in between the distance? So it tells you, we're really in this healthcare has got to be looked at better because this Liberal government got to make some changes. I don't understand that. We had a minister, Hagee was a doctor. He was minister of healthcare once. Now we got that Fury, our premier. He's a doctor. He should understand all this stuff. I don't understand. I don't completely understand. And people is being affected by this here, and sick people's dying, and because of this here. Things got to change because it's affecting our health, people's lives, and the way we live. This is not right. Wherever they're putting the money to, put it where the doctors and nurses need it. Keep our doctors here. Don't mind trying to get rid of them or make them move somewhere else and they're not replaced.
I understand the concern, Sam. I got to get to the news. Anything else quickly?
No, that's it. That's all I can tell you. Make sure that this government makes some changes here. It's got to look at it, deal with this better because they're not doing a poor job.
I appreciate it, Sam. Take care. Stay in touch.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All the best.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's get a break for the newscast. For Alfred and Colin and Barry, you stay right there. We appreciate your patience. Then we'll have lots of time for you as well. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Colin, you're on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Bailey. How are you this morning?
Not too bad, thanks. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. Just want to make some comments on the events that took place on the weekend in western Pennsylvania regarding Mr. Trump. It's absolutely shocking the situation that transpired there on the weekend at that rally. On live TV, I was actually watching it, and it would have been absolutely just one of the most tragic events I would have ever witnessed in my life if he had to have been killed. No matter what I think of him personally and his character or his politics or his policies, no one, and absolutely no one, running for political office or holding political office should be subjected to any form of violence. That is unacceptable, and it's counterproductive, and it achieves nothing.
Well, I think that's all fair to say, and I'll just add to it one more time. It's not like we don't have the propensity and the possibility of that type of rhetoric leading to violence in this country. Think back, Corey Hearn, who we covered poorly as members of the media, talking about a disgruntled sausage maker feeling the struggles of the pandemic. He was loaded for bear, 21 weapons charges, ran through the gates of Rideau Hall looking for the Prime Minister. What do you think would have happened if he had to find him? I think we'd be having a very different conversation. Same thing here. Look, it's only going to make matters worse. And whatever the motivation was, whatever he represented, whether or not there's a manifesto, the role of the Secret Service, whatever questions people are going to be asking, it is going to be toothpaste out of the tube and impossible to put back in. This is a huge problem. So it also gets further exacerbated with social media. So I didn't comment on it. I try to preserve my weekends for a bit of peace and quiet, watch a little sports, spend some time with the kids, standard stuff. But I opened up my social media, unfortunately, because I'm stupid like that. I scrolled through the doom scroll of Twitter, and all of a sudden I was bombarded with tweets saying that he was transgendered, or he was a Jew, or whatever else, as opposed to let's see if an investigation can unearth exactly what happened, what his motivation was, and what he hoped the outcome would be. Whether it be to assassinate him to trigger this so-called revolution that I hear people talk about all the time in the United States, that there's some sort of cleansing that's going to be required, and if and when anyone ever goes after Donald Trump, that will be the impetus. So it's just, I don't know what this week will bring, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be pretty. No, it's not. It's going to be very ugly. That convention is going on all week now in Milwaukee, starting today. Trump has rewritten his speech that he was going to give. He's tossed that out and has written a new one in light of the events that happened on the weekend. But the main point remains here, I think, is that, okay, he came within a half an inch of getting shot in the head and killed on live TV, but his policies are still not going to change, And the people who follow him and subscribe to his viewpoints, they're not going to change. The situation is not going to change. This thing that happened on the weekend, you can call it a wake-up call, an awakening, whatever you want to call it. But he's not going to change. And he is committed to, if he wins office, to terminating the United States Constitution, getting rid of the rule of law, imposing military tribunals in the country, getting rid of the court system, or remaking the court system with people who are loyal to him, whether there's an assassination attempt on him or not. The situation is not going to change. There needs to be a fundamental change at the national level in the United States and at the state levels and county levels about public policy and politics. It's great to debate. I might be a liberal, you might be a conservative. We have different viewpoints on tax cuts, tax increases, gun control, infrastructure, healthcare. That's what needs to be discussed. None of this is being discussed when there's hatred and animus. And it's not just the right, it's the left too, down there. With the assassination attempt on the weekend, within hours, you had people in the U.S. Congress, elected politicians at the federal level, who were saying this was a hit ordered by Biden. This just fans the misinformation and disinformation and the hatred, and that's the root of it right there. You can't get down to talking rationally
about political issues and policy when you have the hatred. It's that simple, I think.
Well, it fuels the so-called base, right? Regardless of what we're talking about, what party, where you are on the spectrum, regardless of what country you're in, that's exactly what we've fallen prey to here now. And, some of that, take this for what it's worth, but I think voter apathy is part of the problem here. If I'm a politician, leader or otherwise, and I realize I only have to get my vote out of my very vocal, passionate base, then, of course, the rest of us don't count. They don't care. They don't care what you think. If it's something that stirs up my already secure voters who are absolutely going to vote, as long as I appease them, and once again, this is for every party on all parts of the political spectrum, if you just have to focus on those people, then and the rest of the non-voters, the apathetic population don't vote, then of course this is what we're going to get. This is exactly how it works. And I get when people say there's no one worth voting for, there should be none of the above, or whatever sort of comfort people need to see on the ballot. The fact of the matter is apathy is the politician's best friend. If they know they only got to focus in on, pick a number, 57% of the population, they already know 20 or 25 or 27% are already in their camp. All they have to do is to make sure that those folks remain engaged, remain committed to voting on election day, then that's all they have to worry about. That's all they have to care about. They don't have to define what the middle class is. They don't have to define what a policy actually means. They don't have to define how things are going to be measured for whether or not they're successful. All they need to do is for folks they know they already have in their back pocket to stay exactly there, and that's what we find ourselves in. So if you don't vote, so what? I mean, it's up to you. But I do think it's become a problem. By-election turnouts have been woefully low. Dismiss Toronto-St. Paul, which of course is a big issue for the federal Liberals. But when we're as apathetic as we are, and the focus only need be on a very small segment of the population for your political successes, what do you think the commentary is going to sound like? What do you think these photo ops and cult of personality rallies and things are going to look like? They're not going to change. Why? Because you don't have to have broad reach. You just have to have very, very narrow reach and keep them in place, keep them in play, keep their donations coming, and Bob's your uncle.
You're absolutely right. And in the electoral college system in the United States, Biden and Trump and their handlers and their teams, if you're the incumbent, if you're on Biden's team, you got California in the bag. It's Democratic, mostly. You got New York in the bag. You're looking at Michigan. You're looking at Ohio, Pennsylvania, maybe Wisconsin, 3 or 4 battleground states where it's going to come down to maybe 30 or 40,000 votes out of 150 or 160 million votes cast. This is what's causing, you're exactly right, this is what's causing the problems. You have this 3 or 4% of people that are going to decide the outcome of an election for the other 96%, right? And factor in the people who don't vote, But the situation down there, it's a gun culture. It's entrenched in the Constitution, and it's not just the Second Amendment. You have to look at the people who are on the bench. It's the U.S. Supreme Court, as you referenced earlier about the bump stock. The U.S. Supreme Court gave a pass on that, right? So it's the people that are being put on the bench, and it's the people who are elected president, because the president nominates people to be put on all the federal court benches, including the U.S. Supreme Court. So this is and they have lifetime tenure. Unlike in this country, you have to retire at 75. So they're on there. If you're 51 or 52, you could be on there for 40 years, And this is the law that's being made from the top court. And when they, give a sanction to bump stocks and the right to carry and conceal and open carry and all these things down there that various states have, and it's all reference to the Second Amendment. When people were chasing each other with muskets when the Second Amendment was ratified in the late 1700s, in the Bill of Rights, the United States in 2024 is not the United States of 1795. Culture and populations change, and constitutions have to evolve with that. And that's one of the big problems with their judicial system down there. You have the originalists versus the contextualists. The people, the majority, the supermajority in the U.S. Supreme Court now, the 6-3 conservative majority, they are originalists. They read the words off the paper, and they don't give any kind of nuanced interpretation of the Constitution, in my opinion. It's hardcore gospel.
Yeah, just tell people what they want to hear. Appreciate the time, Colin. I got to get going.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right, let's take that break right on time. When we go back to recreational food fishery, how's that going out there? What are you seeing out in the water? The cod big as dogs? That's what been reported to me. And just one more friendly reminder, and I saw a video recently, I'm not sure if it was from this year to be honest, but yet another cod taken at the water's level by a shark. So don't reach down over the gunnel to the water's edge to retrieve your cod. Pull it up over the gunnel with whether it be your jigger or your rod before you have your finger snipped by a hungry shark. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Barry, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Thanks for taking my call.
No problem.
Paddy, we've been talking about the boat limit for quite a while. Unbeknownst to me, there was you had somebody from DFO on your program last week or the week before talking about the boat limit.
Yep.
Okay, so I've been trying to get some clarification as well as myself, as you know. I talked to DFO last week around Wednesday, putting requests for information about the boat limit, which they said they could freely share to anybody who wants to call them. I said I'd like to get an email from them so I could post it on the Facebook page of the coalition. They said they would, but up until Friday, which I asked them to send it to me so I could post it to make it public, I didn't receive it. Over the weekend, I received a call from a buddy of mine. I sent you the email from him that he received, that he requested from DFO, stating clearly that there is no boat limit when there's more than 3 people in the boat. The limit is 5 fish per person for each member on board the boat.
Yeah, I mean, I've been referencing an email from whenever it was a couple of years ago, but the caution that I'll add to this is that if you have a vessel that's safe for 5 people to be in it, you can all bring in 5 fish. You're not going to be charged. But there's policies, regulations, and management measures. DFO has also quite clearly said if they think or see that people are abusing, because they always talk about the boat limit being 15 fish per boat, if they think people are abusing the recreational food fishery, whether it be repeated trips over the course of the weekend, like I know somebody that they're kind of bragging in a group text that they went out 7 times. Right, I mean, 7 times? Well, that seems like a lot to me. If DFO thinks and sees and feels that, and sees so many people maybe going out in some of the larger vessels from, say, down the marina in manuals, and in comes 50 fish, at some point they may indeed put their foot down. So, yes, if you have 4 or 5 of the lads are out jigging cod and you can all bring your 5 in, fair ball. They do talk about the difference between regulations and management measures.
Yes, indeed. And Paddy, we're not talking about the average person is not going out exceeding the limits.
Nope.
The average person wants to get their fish. So
that's it.
I can understand what DFO is saying, but also though, if the boat can hold 5 people, why make 2 trips?
Yep.
Right. So, hopefully, with this email and a lot of confusion, Paddy, comes up with the press release that DFO issues with the 15 fish boat limit. If they got rid of that altogether and just said 5 fish per person, there would be no confusion.
Yeah, probably not.
There's lots of people going out in boats that can safely carry 5 or 6 people, but because of that 15 fish boat limit that they see in the release, they're only taking out two others with themselves because they don't want to split 15 fish between 4, 5, or 6 people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you're probably right there. And so this has now become, I think, pretty clear. It's one thing for me to say it, one thing for you to say it, but quite another if DFO would just come out and as opposed to respond to individual emails, just come on. Give us a base understanding of how they've crafted this particular message. Give folks the comfort in knowing that the message is coming from actual DFO officials as opposed to me and you, even though we are referring directly to DFO emails. So I don't know what the downside to that would be, because they're not changing any of the water on the beans. They're not changing the rules midstream. The rules are what the rules are. It's wonder we just can't get them to very clearly just say it to the general public. Why not?
Yeah. Absolutely. And for me to say, Paddy, and for you to say it, not everybody hears it. But when DFO issues that press release at the beginning of the season, if they have no boat limit there, everybody would get the message clearly. That would not mean that everybody's going out, exceeding the limits or anything like that, though, of course, right?
No, I appreciate this, Barry. Anything else quickly?
Yes, Teddy, as well. Now you mentioned about the sharks. There's lots of sharks on the go.
Yeah.
There's always been lots of sharks on the go, Paddy. My thought on why we're seeing so many sharks, because during food fishery, a lot of the boats congregate together. They're pulling up fish from the bottom, which are fish sending off distress signals. Some people are bleeding the sea of fish, and that's naturally going to attract more sharks. So you want to be careful and take the advice of use a gas, or just be careful. Don't put your hands in the water.
Pretty much simple as that. All right, thanks, Barry.
As always, it's been a pleasure, Paddy.
My pleasure. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So, Dave, let's put out another formal just request. And, we don't have to get into modelling data points for Northern Cod or Capelin or mackerel or anything. Just for a fundamental declaration of exactly what people need to know about the recreational food fishery, the boat quota and all the rest, because if you hear it from them, that's probably very helpful as opposed to taking it from me. Let's go to line number 1. Alfred, you're on the air. Hi, Alfred, on line number 1, you're on the air. Dave, is that up possibly? Alfred, line number 1, you're on the air. You were. Let's keep going. Let's roll to line number 2. Good morning, Terry, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty, can you hear me good?
Not great. It sounds like we're on speaker.
Oh, sorry about that. It's my phone speaker has been a little bit broken since I dropped it in the pool. Is it audible enough that I might proceed, or should I try to call back?
Can you just pick up the receiver and speak to us like that?
No, I can't. As soon as I go to that, it doesn't actually, I can't hear anything on my end. There's water damage to the phone.
Okay, but do you have another phone to use to call us back?
I will later on, but...
okay, let's try. Forget it, Terry. Let's try. Go ahead.
All right. So I wanted to just take some time to thank the municipalities of New West Valley, Dover, Gambo, and Glovertown for making Neurotalk a success. This was an autism informational event that we had rolled out, Autism Newfoundland and Labrador, over the past 4 weeks. And it started off kind of shaky, but in the end, it was actually really successful and a really informative event to a lot of the public in around those towns in Central. And the townships that we partnered with in general did an amazing job. They went above and beyond to try to make the event successful, and it definitely ended up being that way in the end. And so I wanted to take some time to thank everybody within those townships for helping to make our event possible. It definitely would not have succeeded without them.
Give folks just a base idea of what went on at these events.
Well, Neurotalk was something that a lot of people in Central have been calling for a long time. A lot of mobile events to be brought about to discuss autism and to basically be a public forum where autism can not only be discussed but learned about. Everything that went into it would be what you would normally find in a standard neurodiversity conference or in any general neurodiversity conference or seminar surrounding autism, a modern one anyway. And so we rolled that out with the caveat that it would not be one-sided, that people could put their own thoughts and questions forward at any time. It was presented a lot like a TED Talk in that there was a main sequence and a main speaker, but people could also jump in to ask questions, put their thoughts forward. We had a couple people recite poetry even, and in many of the handouts there were poets who are autistic that wanted to put their own thoughts forward as well for the event. And so it's more or less just a standard neurodiversity conference, but miniaturized to be a little bit more time sensitive, you would say, for the times that we have allotted.
You know, the conversation regarding neurodiversity, what sometimes gets lost in the shuffle is we are not asking for others who are not members of that community to give up some of their access, to lose some of their hours of shopping or whatever the case may be, or to change everything regarding how schools are set up. What we're doing is talking about just some realities of life for a significant percentage of the population and very small things we can do to adjust to make things more accessible, more accommodating for people who are members of the neurodiverse community.
Right, of course. And first and foremost, of course, you know, a lot of that comes from communication with the neurodiverse community and the people who have lived experience as autistic people or ADHDers or anything along those lines in regards to neurodiversity. And we see a huge uptick of that happening now, where there's less and less of neurotypical or allistic non-autistic people speaking on behalf of neurodiverse people, and more neurodiverse or neurodivergent people speaking on behalf of themselves and actually being heard and implementing changes that doesn't, like you said, it doesn't kick anybody else off the bench per se, but it does allow for more efficient and more streamlined actual supports where they're needed most.
Fair enough, and I'm glad that it's going as well as it was, and the municipalities who have gotten behind it, congratulations to them. Because sometimes, you know, it's even just a base lack of knowledge or misunderstanding about what we're talking about and what some minor accommodations look like.
Absolutely. You've nailed that one for sure, Patty, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. Would you like to say anything else this morning, Terry?
Nope, that covers it. I'll just end it all with a general thank you, and thank you for your continued support.
I appreciate the time. Happy to do it. Stay in touch.
You too. Thanks.
Okay. Bye, Terry. Let's go ahead and take a break. You know, when we talk about neurodiverse, many people will focus in on autism, for instance. And autism, whether we talk about the prevalence and the diagnosis and the delays with getting some things like, for instance, speech therapy and what have you, and there are very real issues. And then you talk about so-called IQ measures, which is really counterintuitive and counterproductive, I should say. The issue regarding the broad nature of the autism spectrum, and I like when people use this particular phrase, if you've met someone on the spectrum, that's it. You've only met one person on the spectrum, because autism can move all the way from nonverbal runners to people who are highly functional. And so when we talk about it like that, I think, you know, it helps broaden the understanding of exactly what the spectrum reflects and where people might be on the autism spectrum. Let's take a break. We'll make back plenty of time for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go line number one. Beverly, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi,
Beverly.
Beverly. Okay.
I'm talking about the pipes. Hi.
Go ahead.
You want to go first? I'm talking about the pipes at City Hall. We're having some problems with the water in the basement. So my next door neighbor called, and she called in the city, and they advised her and me to get new pipes. That was on July the 8th. Now we paid $800. She paid $400, and I paid $400. But they also told the next door to take down his patio steps and my patio steps to be ready. Now, when they were here first, they said it would be 2 weeks. So when I went down to City Hall on Friday, he said it would be a month. That's a long time without going out the front door. You know.
So what exactly?
We have steps there now, temporary, but I can't get that. I'm trying to see if there's any help or any way of getting some help to get this done. We are seniors, and I got arthritis hips, and I can't get out on the steps. And,
what exactly do you need?
So I was wondering if there's any help or any issue. None?
So you'd like for a carpenter or a handyman to come over and to
Say anything, please?
Pardon? Pardon?
No, we're looking for some help with the pipes. If we can get you want, just a second now, what's the one to talk?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. We went down to City Hall on the 12th. It's going to be 2 weeks.
we had our front landings just dismantled. And she said it's not going to be there for another month. So 2 weeks passed, another month to come.
Okay.
They don't play fair. I don't know if what they're saying is legit or just something like the one. I don't know.
Yes, they told us that it would take 2 weeks, but now they're saying it take a month. So we're in a position where we can't get out the front door because we're not tall enough to reach down to the step. And, that's a hard position to be in. So we don't know where to go from here,
Okay, so what exactly are you trying...
We're waiting to get new pipes underneath for the house.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure what the reference to the pipes...
We just trying to see if anyone know anything. Last year we had an overflow in our laundry tub. And then next door people had an overflow in their bathtub in the basement. So they're saying the pipes are old and we need to replace them.
Okay, so are you able simply to call a plumber and see if... Are you able to call a plumber and see what needs to be done?
No, well, the plumber is not going to help because it's going to happen day in a day.
Okay, so unfortunately...
So what the city said, we need to put in new pipes.
Okay, so pipes that do what? Pipes that are carrying what? Water, waste from the toilet? Because I don't know what to try to help you with.
The pipes underneath the house are old. The pipes underneath the house is old. The house been here 60 years old. So they said if we get new pipes, we wouldn't have any more problems with the plumbing and that, in the basement.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on hold. Dave's going to try to get some further details from you to see if we can't get you someone to help. How's that? Dave, you can take over there. Let's keep going. Let's go to line number 4. Stu, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Not too bad, I suppose. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad, sir. Seems like you got some kind of problems there with the phones there. It seems like it's acting up or something.
I'm not sure. It's not on our end, I don't think. For instance, Terry admitted that he had a problem with his own phone. He dropped it in the pool or something. And Beverly, I'm not really sure what was going on there, but I can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Right on. Yeah, just a quick now on the follow-up. Our last conversation, we were talking about the hemochromatosis issue, and have you spoken with the health minister to get their take on it?
Well, of course, now we've got a new interim health minister, and we even thought about inviting Minister Hogan on to talk about whatever's inside his new portfolio and the concerns that people have. But until we actually give him an actual time to try to get up to speed, kind of felt like we were getting in front of ourselves on that one. So that's the plan, is to have him on to ask whatever people suggest are the important questions. And you go ahead and put yours back out there. I know what you're talking about, Stu, but maybe some of the listeners don't.
Yeah, like I said, the hemochromatosis is a genetic, for the most part, genetic condition that afflicts anybody with Northern European ancestry, and that certainly encompasses a lot of Newfoundlanders. And this condition, it being genetic, it mimics so many different diseases, if you want, including diabetes, heart problems, liver, all these things, because the iron will destroy everything if it's not detected properly and verified. So that's basically what it is. It's called hemochromatosis, and only an actual blood test, specific blood test, can be used to determine if the person needs to go for further testing, which a lab here in St. John's verified mine. So that's just something that people need to keep in mind. I read an article on my my Firefox web browser, stating that iron is a new high cholesterol, so people need to be aware of it. Yeah, but anyway, Patty, my main reason for calling was about the fishery and food fishery in general. A friend of mine and I, again, are getting ready to invite DFO to charge us and take us back to court because there's so much ambiguity going on with the food fishery alone. The fishery is another mess. When it comes to our resources, everybody has got the right to harvest those resources and to be free from interference of any kind or any obstruction whatsoever. Now, we can talk about the charter, too, which is basically, I don't rely on it anymore because it should be called what it is, the Charter of Privileges and Permissions, because it's not a right when it can be regulated that one day you got it, next day you don't. But anyway, I got an interesting case here I found after I do a lot of research. And this case goes back to 1896. It's called Provincial Fisheries, Supreme Court of Canada. The paragraph states, and this is case law, of course, and that in the Queen versus Lord, 195 Peters, delivering a judgment of the Supreme Court of Prince Edward Island, said, with respect to these public rights, navigation and fishery, the King is in fact nothing more than a trustee of the public and has no authority to obstruct or grant to others any right, DFO, any right to obstruct or abridge the public in the free enjoyment of them. We can go through other things. There's another interesting one here when it comes to, now, Patty, certainly you would say, I'm sure you would, that government is basically our servants. They're public servants. Is that correct?
Well, technically speaking, sure.
Why would it be technical?
Why wouldn't it be technical?
Fact.
You're asking me a technical question. I gave you a technical answer.
Okay. Okay, we'll agree that they're servants. Another court case is used quite a bit. It's called In Unanimous Judgment of McEwen, again citing Lord Devlin and Brooks versus Bernard, noted that the outrageous or oppressive conduct of the government is quite different. Oh, sorry, I'm out in the workshop knocking things over. It's quite different. A similar conduct by powerful corporations or individuals that is much more serious. For the servants of the government are also the servants of the people, and the use of their power must always be subordinate to their duty of service. In other words, they're there to act as our servants to make sure we get the services that we need, and but instead we get more oppression than we do, and it's it wouldn't be lawful for them to do so. It's quite simple. But anyway, getting back to the food fishery. Like I said, we've been here now probably over 500 years. It's probably what brought us here to these shores. I always say that if DFO was standing on the shore when these people came here 500 years ago, they probably would have turned around and went back to where they came from because of the oppressive nature of what DFO is. And again, they're public servants. They come under, you ask any of the unions who looks after them, yeah, they come under public servants. And they are supposed to be subordinate to us, not the other way around. So they make up all these fictitious laws that only actually applies to fictitious people. Because in Canadian law, the only individual person, if you want, known to our law is the corporation or the body corporate. And it's also a fiction. You can look at Black's Law. It explains all that. So the people just need to realize that they're being hoodwinked when it comes to going out and getting a few fish. Nobody's going to go out and destroy it, as most people believe.
Well, we already did.
Yeah, we already did, but not the average Joe who wants to put his boat in the water and go get a few fish just for the sake of getting something different to eat. Yes, of course, the fishery was brought to the brink by overfishing. I think, if I'm not mistaken, even the federal government at one time got into a dragger building program that went out and did the damage as well. You know, like I said, we can't be doing that. You can't be out in somebody's house, which would be the fish, and destroying the habitat that they need to reproduce. Right? So,
and therein lies why the industry has been regulated the way it is, because where do you put the cap on that particular bottle? Because if you say individuals' rights should trump any public servant decision making, whether it be on the White Hills at DFO or any other industry or any other government department, then therein lies the problem. Because abuse can start very innocently, very innocuously, very gently, but we've proven to ourselves that given to our own devices, we will indeed, the free-for-all will start sooner than later. I mean, I'm not defending regulations, because I wouldn't mind being able to go out this afternoon, pardon me, today is Monday. I wouldn't mind being able to go out tomorrow afternoon, because I haven't got time this afternoon, so I can't participate in this weekend's food fishery because I wasn't available. I was too busy. But I would be able to the next couple of days, but apparently I can't. So things like that, I'm as frustrated as anybody else. There's no good justification for how I can't go out on a Tuesday when I actually have time on Tuesday, but I don't on Monday.
Yeah, but anyway, the law protects you to do it because it protects your rights, and let them take you to court. You got the case law there. You can have those charges done away. But when it comes to the fishery, though, Patty, the biggest threat to the fish stocks that we have been dealing with for years and years, and the federal government doesn't seem to want to do anything. I guess you can almost say what a lot of people have said, that our fisheries, the bulk of it, has been given away kind of a barter system for trade with other countries, because they're still out there overfishing. You've heard enough coming from the late Gus Etchiger years ago. And we still got quite a few people speaking about it, Phil Earl and all these guys. Yeah, so they're absolutely right. So why should we be punished for what the federal government is allowing when it comes to foreign overfishing and so on and so forth? You know, so let's start there. But when you or I, like I said again, we can't get a decent day on the weekend because the weather's not always cooperating, and nobody controls that. So, so go, if you want to fish, go get it. I'll send you the case law. You go get it.
All right.
And that's what I'm going to do.
I appreciate the time, Stu. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, like I said, but we need to straighten this out. There's too much ambiguity there.
Stu, thanks for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's go and take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Lee, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Patty. Just wanted to call in and briefly talk about Labrador and to encourage people that have never been to Labrador to consider a staycation there, and some general tips on what you should do if you plan to go to Labrador.
Where are you right now?
I'm actually back home. I spent the last 2 weeks up in Labrador, and it was pretty amazing.
Tell us a bit about your trip and some tips that you have before we get to the news. Go ahead.
Sure. So some of the things that people should go check out if they go to Labrador are Point Amour Lighthouse. It's the second largest lighthouse in Canada. Battle Harbour, which is a recreated town they rebuilt the town from the glory days of when Sir Wilfrid Grenfell was up there. Red Bay, you'll learn about the Basque history of whaling in Labrador.
Mm-hmm. That's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well, the Red Bay whaling site.
Yeah, it is. The Labrador Interpretation Center in Northwest River, and there's another museum in Northwest River as well that people should check out, and Five Wing Goose Bay up in Goose Bay.
And, of course, Five Wing Goose is now housing some of the evacuees from Labrador City. Just very quickly on that front, and I don't know if you saw it or experienced it, or even if it's happening yet, but have the Germans began their low-level flying tests in Labrador? Did you notice any of that?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't see anything with that regard.
Okay.
Actually, I drove around the base. I didn't see much activity at all.
That's because there isn't. There's very little.
Yes, exactly. Some tips. So if you're considering doing a staycation to Labrador, first thing you should do is go to the Northern Lights Inn in Lanzaclear and get yourself a satellite phone because there's large areas of Labrador that don't have cell service. The satellite phones are free, so it doesn't cost you anything to pick one up. I had one for 2 weeks and then returned it at the end of my trip.
And good for you. I'll just throw a little tidbit in there. I think there was something like 80 sat phones that were available for people to borrow. The problem then became that all of a sudden we were down to like 45 or something. People weren't returning the sat phones, which is such a strange thing. You've been giving them free of charge to keep you safe as you traverse some of the spots that don't have any cell service. And apparently we're down a bunch of sat phones because people haven't brought them back.
Wow, that's amazing.
Strange.
Because the $1,700 they'll charge you if you don't return it, so I don't know why people would not return them.
Fair enough.
Last tip I have is bring a bug jacket with you. The flies are pretty thick up there.
Yeah, they can carry you away. Flies are incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And last thing I just want to mention before you go to the news is we drove to Cartwright. So that's an interesting experience in and of itself because it's 85 kilometers of dirt road. So when you're driving over it, all you can hear is rocks hitting the undercarriage of your car.
And what was the state of that road?
It was in good shape. It's just that it's very dusty and it's a lot of rocks. We actually met a grader. It's graded fairly regularly. We actually passed a grader on the way into the community.
Yeah, there have been times in the past where that particular stretch of road was pretty impassable or unpassable. So I'm glad it's not that bad. I'm glad it's being graded relatively frequently. It's a different world than Labrador.
Oh, it is, yeah. One of the things that was interesting for me is it doesn't get dark till about 10 o'clock as opposed to here on the island.
Yeah, big sky country, yeah.
And another thing that was different, to me anyway, is that some parts of Labrador is on Newfoundland Standard Time and other parts of it is on Atlantic Standard Time.
Yeah, and that's why you hear references all the time on newscasts and for most parts of Labrador when they make reference to the time. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's about it for me. Thanks for the time.
I'm glad you called, Lee, and I'm glad you enjoyed your holiday to Labrador.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people living on the island that have never been to Labrador. I mean, that's up to you, what you want to do, where you want to go. But I can tell you, it's pretty amazing stuff. And it is absolutely a different world in Labrador. And in many respects, in many parts of Labrador, it's absolutely stellar, spectacular. It really, truly is. And speaking of the flies, they absolutely can carry you away. I mean, it's one thing to get a few flicks in, quite another to have the buff up around over your nose and your mouth and the glasses welded on. Just try your best to keep them from going up your sleeve and up the leg of your trunks and all the rest of it. Let's take a break. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away.
Your voice in Newfoundland and Labrador's biggest conversation.
If you want to know what's happening in your province, tune in to Openline every day.
Have your say weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. on Openline with Paddy Daly on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the Mayor of Happy Valley Goose Bay. That's George Andrews. Mayor Andrews, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So, obviously, there's been a lot asked of your community over the last stretch of time, given the evacuation at Churchill Falls, the evacuation in Labrador City. Tell us how the community's been able to make this work, because that's a lot of people coming time after time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Paddy. So, in both instances, I can't say enough. When we invoke our emergency operations center and put our emergency plan in place, it includes a whole load of community partners. It's the businesses, the ministerial associations, our groups that we have in town. We're so blessed with Five Wing Goose Bay and things like that. So, the resources, the personnel, everything gets coordinated through our emergency operations center. And, it was 500 people or so, a little over 500 for our Churchill Falls incident, and now it's we've had over 4,000 people register, or approximately 4,000 people register with our center here. So we do what we do. We put our plan in place, and knock on wood, things go very well, and they are going very well so far. And we're hoping for rain, and we're hoping for success that folks can return home in short order.
Give us some idea, some of the specifics of what's kicked in when some of these evacuation orders are happening and what it does for you. Like, give us some idea who comes to your aid, departments, whether it be federal and provincial and or municipally.
Yep, so we have our emergency operations plan. So what happens is we trigger that. It opens our operations center, and from that, there's a number of call-outs to various groups and entities and agencies and things like that. So, like for instance, in this case, a call went to an offer of help from the province from Muskrat Falls that they had 600 beds, 600 mattresses and that. So we put a plan in place to logistically get those from the Muskrat Falls site to the community and out to the centres. I'll give you another example. Like the Ministerial Association kicks in, all the churches kick in, whether it's providing food or shelter or transportation. We have 5 Wing Goose Bay who kicks in with accommodations and other logistics that may be needed. At this particular instant, because of the size, we have the Red Cross involved. So the Red Cross kicks in their own entity, all coordinated through our EOC. So that's the type of things. And then, we've put out the requests for folks who happen to have accommodations with, that could accommodate somebody with accessibility or disability issues. We also have, this time, a large number of people who are traveling with pets. Pets are, people consider their pets like their children. They want to try to stay with their pets and that. So, our SPCA is overrun with those requests, but then we need the accommodation side. So we've had people kick in with homes, trailers. We've had people, Airbnbs that have given out to free of charge. Our hotels have kicked in. So it's truly a community effort, and that's what makes it successful.
And I know, given what you've said so far, by no means am I asking you to complain, but at some point the community gets a little bit stressed at the seams because this is a lot to take on. So what do you say to folks to keep their spirits buoyed and to know that, at some point the end will be near? The residents of Labrador City will thankfully return home, hopefully sooner than later, for their own benefit, not for the benefit of your community. So what do you say to your community partners to keep them going here, because the end is not here quite yet?
Yes. So one of the big things in emergency management is sustainability. So for instance, today is Monday, and the community, you have to go back to work, you have to go back to your life, kids' activities have to continue, et cetera, like that. For me, what I try to say is, yes, there's going to be little incidents that you hear of or whatever, but overall, we're several thousand people are in our community. Just be a little bit empathetic, put yourself in those people's, where they pack their car, their family, their little belongings that they could, and they put Labrador City in the rearview mirror, not knowing if there's going to be, a home to go back to. So with that, I personally, like I say, yes, you might have to wait that extra 10 or 15, 20 minutes in your Tim Hortons line, or, you can't do this regularly because this place is closed or it's been repurposed for, accommodations and things. But overall, I've heard very few complaints from town. One of the things is, like I say, the sustainability. So from a planning perspective, we ensure that, our volunteers, the original impact, you're up to 24 hours and that kind of stuff. But as that goes on, you try to manage that so people don't get tired and we can be sustainable. The Red Cross is in now with a group that has taken, the registrations and stuff over that. So from my community perspective, look, I said, just keep doing what we can do. We can only do so much. But, that so much is so much to the people that are here from Labrador City. So, there's not one person that I've come across that's not super thankful. It's not the Ritz-Carlton accommodations, but it is accommodations. And, we're trying our best. One of the things, people want information. So we've been trying from a council to provide the information from our community perspective, and I know Labrador City is doing the same thing through their means. Province is doing the same thing. So, as much information as we can get to people, that the light at the end of the tunnel is not a train. At some point in time, when it's safe to do so, I'm sure folks will be returned as quick but as safe as possible. So for my community, just keep doing what we're doing.
Mayor Andrews, this is a very specific question, but we were told that the province were looking at the possibility for the German Air Force to come to 5 Wing Goose to participate in the low-level flying exercises, which were really controversial back in the day. Has that happened?
No, there are some training exercises that are being held at Five Wing with mostly Army land-based, to the best of my knowledge. But there have been some, more increase of aircrafts that have been passing through. But to the best of my knowledge, and that question would be best routed to the Five Wing personnel, but there hasn't been a low-level flying program put back in our community to this date. So,
and there will be some increased activity at Five Wing Goose, given the most recent announcement by then Defence Minister Anita Anand regarding our NORAD commitment. So there's a lot of future yet to be held at Five Wing Goose.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, this community was founded on the military need, and has served the military since it was built by the Americans way back when. We've hosted many different types of training from a foreign military perspective, low-level flying, which is one. We're excited about the opportunity as a community to bring back any kind of activity that brings economic development and prosperity to our folks. We had a very successful low-level flying program for many years. Things were mitigated through the Institute of Environmental Monitoring. So we're hoping that processes can be put in place to reinstitute at some point in time that activity. From a community perspective, it's an economic generator, and there's not many places, similar to folks in rural Newfoundland where their fish plant gets reestablished, or their sawmill gets reestablished, or the mine gets reestablished. We're hoping the same thing happens here, and we have that economic generator, which was a low-level flying activity, safely and environmentally as safeguarded as can be. But we're really excited if that opportunity comes to our door, and we're welcoming that. I hope that happens.
Last one. I don't think your community was specifically mentioned in the news story that was on the front page above the fold in the Weekend Telegram. It was more specifically just Lab West General, but it was maybe some vague reference to the transient population, which of course we know has been a concern living on the old trail network. But the fact that there's been an uptick, and this happened here in this city too, regarding property crime, what have you, what are you seeing on the ground? Because the RNC says that, we do see an uptick in property-related crimes in the course of the summer, whether it be access to property, easier than climbing over snowbanks, what have you. So what do you see on the ground in Happy Valley Goose Bay on that front?
Yeah, so Paddy, it's it's not new for us here. I've spoke to many media outlets in terms of the activity that's happened here. We see an uptake of homeless, unhoused, I guess, and transient folks in our community. With that, there is some safety-related issues that we continue to bring to the Parliament, and we'll soon be reaching out to the Premier again to sit down and have a chat. They did give us some money for additional security, but the security that's in place is just an observe and report type of process. There's no ability to engage or anything. That rests with the RCMP. So, from my perspective, and what Council has been saying is, we need to continuously, aggressively work on a situation or plans that can help us with that. But we're urging folks to call the RCMP if you have an issue or a concern. If there's somebody, walking in your garden or, trying to get into your house, call the RCMP, get that documented, and, a response should come from that. It's really difficult now because, we have an extra, several thousand people in our community. So, we continue to try to manage it. As a community, we can only do so much as a town council. So, we're hoping our partners step up and have our conversations with us again. We're seeing it now, but this weekend sort of, adds a lot more people in our town. But next week, hopefully, when folks get to return home, the issue around the unhoused and transient population is still here, and it's still high on people's minds. And the safety of people, safety of seniors and things like that are of concern. We hear it every day, if not every other day, or you read it, on social media. So we continue as a council to press, our message forward to our provincial partners. We really need help. And yes, it is increased. It's increased everywhere. But I go back to, the type of activity that we've witnessed and we've been party to and our children have been party to is probably not at the level. This is a community of 8,000 people. If this activity goes on in St. John's of, several 100,000 people, it's a bit of a different story. But we see it here. It's in our front yards, our backyards. Our kids see it. Our bike trail, we're between the school and various places like the YMCA and Tim Hortons and stuff like that is a big concern. So safety, security, we can do so much, and we're looking for the partner, especially the province and the RCMP and things like that, to step up and be part of that solution as well.
I appreciate the time this morning, Mayor Andrews. For you and your community members and partners, everyone appreciates what you're doing.
Yeah, and like I say, our thoughts are with the folks from Lab City. Look, we're trying our best. We have our operations center that's dealing with different requests and problems. We just try to knock them off one at a time, with hope that, fingers crossed, we'll see some rain, and hopefully our folks and friends can head home. And we look at it. This could be us tomorrow. So, we do what we can do, and that's what we do up here. So,
here. Thanks for making time for the show.
Take care anytime.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, there you go. It's Happy Valley Goose Bay Mayor George Andrews. Let's take a break. When we get back, Janice wants to talk about funeral costs. And then John was a visitor from New Jersey. He wants to talk about what he saw when he came to the province. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Janice, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm not doing so good, boy. Patty, my daughter, Sarah Strickland, she was passed away there last Monday morning. She was at her boyfriend's place, residing with him for a while. And Monday morning at 5 o'clock, the ENTs were called to her residence, only to find her there non-responsive. They had revived her and took her to the hospital over at St. Clair's, where she stayed in intensive care until Thursday evening. They think that she might have had a heart attack. And so they had her at the St. Clair's Hospital in ICU. They put her on life support. She was on life support from the time she went in Monday till Thursday evening. I went up, I got a call from the hospital stating that she had, her heart blood pressure was 220 over 160. And I went up, and they told me that it's only going to get worse from here with what's going on with her. At the time when she was revived by ENT, they don't know how long she's been without oxygen to her brain. So therefore, her brain was dead. They had taken pictures of her brain, and they said that half the brain was black due to non-oxygen, right? Now, with saying that, they told me and explained to me that the brain cannot regenerate itself. Once it's dead, it's dead. It's not like a kidney or something like that. So I had to go up Thursday evening, and I had to basically let her go. And but in knowing that I had to let her go, I had to go to the funeral home and make arrangements for a funeral and get the cost of what it's going to cost and that. And they told me, I went to Call's Funeral Home, and they told me that it would cost just to cremate my daughter and put her in a box, it's going to cost me over $5,000. One doesn't think about this, especially, a mother, because she doesn't think that she's going to be burying her daughter before her.
I'm really sorry for your loss, Janice. My deepest condolences. I hate to hear these stories. So obviously, the average cost of a funeral in this province is around $7,778, I read. And that's out of reach for many folks. So I assume you're looking for some support money for a funeral.
I am. I worked as a home care worker for 33 years, and all I could do with the money that I made was put the food on the table for my children, put the clothes and shoes on their backs. I had nothing extra. I had nothing to put away to set aside. I'm not a mother who does drinking or drugs or anything like that. I did what I did for my children, and I did what I could to, do the best for them. They never had name brand clothes and that, but they had clothes on their back, And when I found out the cost of this, like, I just stood there in awe, and I'm still, I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, $5,000. I went looking around, and somebody told me that welfare will give you
Yeah, if you're on income support,
$2,300 to put towards it. You got no choice. You're asking yourself, do you want to cremate her for that? Because I know the funeral is going to cost like $13,000 to $17,000 to put her in the ground.
Well, I'll leave that particular decision up to you. But you're right. On income support, there is $2,338 that you can indeed avail of. If your daughter ever paid into the Canada Pension Plan, there's a death benefit there. It's a one-time payment of $2,500. So we're getting much closer to the $5,000 here.
But my daughter never worked a day in her life.
Okay, well then she doesn't qualify for that one. There is a really good resource that I have used recently when it comes to different pots of support money for things regarding funerals, whether it be cremation and or burials. And it's a very easy website that you can have a look at. And it does include the things that we've already discussed. It's called CanadianFunerals.com. Simple as that. It's got a full list, whether it be for folks who are members of the military that have been workplace safety and insurance board, so WSIB benefits. It talks about financial assistance for vets and all the way up and down the line. But it's a pretty good catch-all of all the pots of money that you might be able to avail of. There's also alternative sources of funding for funeral programs. There's a list of those that are on this particular website as well. So in addition to reaching out to income support, to avail of that $2,338, maybe just do yourself a favor and check out CanadianFunerals.com, which is pretty reputable stuff. I clicked a bunch of the links, and they absolutely go to the actual official page of the departments that they're talking about, so that you might find some help there too.
Okay. But as you were saying, though, too, Patty, I am asking or looking for support from the public if it's possible. She was at the Health Sciences Center. They resumed the body and did the autopsy, and now I got to go over there and pick up the reports on that. As far as I know, her body is at the Health Sciences Center right now, and I'm only hearing this now about all the rest of the bodies that are sitting there waiting to be buried themselves, you know? And it really scares me. I mean, like my daughter, I understand that there's other people too that have to be buried, but when you got a loved one, and you know, I can't do anything. I'm only on an income of $200 every 2 weeks, $249. That pays my cable, my phone, and my hydro. I don't have that. My hydro bill is $800. I can't even keep up with it.
I understand, Janice. So please do reach out to the provincial department and get that money rolling. There's also, if anyone listening to the program this morning has heard your plea and would like to help, we're happy to connect you if someone contacts us. No doubt about that. And check out that particular website, because you never know. One of these alternative sources of funding might be something that suits you and your daughter. So again, I'm really sorry to hear of Sarah's passing. And would you like to say anything else before I have to go, Janice?
I would just like to say, Patty, if the public, I know that people are very, very kind here in Newfoundland, and if they want to get in touch with me, I would really love to leave my number with you.
Yeah, David has it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's great. I really appreciate that, Patty. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. You take good care of yourself.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, Janice. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, regarding the unclaimed bodies, the amount of money it's taken to move bodies from those reefer units out in the alleyway behind the Health Sciences Centre into the underground parking garage, and to put up a wall so it's out of sight, out of mind, and we can make reference to as more dignified than the alley, but still they're unclaimed. The hundreds of thousands of dollars it takes to expand morgue operations or services at the Health Sciences Centre, you think we could refunnel that money into actually finding a way to whether set up formal arrangements with the funeral homes or whatever the case may be. And also, like in many jurisdictions, and this is not to be cold, but this has worked for decades and centuries elsewhere, is the whole concept of a potter's field. People might be familiar with potter's field because you've heard it referenced on Law and Order or something, but it's a real thing. It's been happening forever. The concept actually comes from the Bible, from Matthew. Because when people would go into the fields and dig for the clay for their clay work, of course they'd leave behind the trenches which were used and filled with people who had passed. So potter's field is that reference. There's got to be a better way, a better idea than what we're currently doing, I think. What do you think? Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll hear from John about what he thought about the province when he vacationed from New Jersey. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. John, you're on the air.
Patty?
Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, Patty. My name is John, and I live in New Jersey, about 15 miles west of Manhattan. And I bought a house in Port Rexton in 2007. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever expect to have a place so beautiful physically, and the people. I just love Newfoundlanders, and the first time I came here, I remember my wife and I said, these people are friendlier than Ireland. And lo and behold, we're here, and we're ever so happy and grateful that we have this place. And I've utilized you, and I love that VOCM, the voice of the common man. You're my companion when I jog through the wooded areas of Port Rexton near Skirwink, and you're a great companion, and I get to know the local Newfoundlanders even better. I mean, all their issues, whether it's fishing or health. But today in particular, I heard one gentleman say things about, the political situation in the United States. Starting at the top, I am somewhat surprised, not pleased to find out that, ever since I started coming up here in the early 2000s, all the hotels, motels that I stay in, the cable is always either MSNBC or CNN, no Fox. And even the cable company here, when I got my cable, the default was automatically to MSNBC or to CNN, no Fox. Not that one or the other is the Bible, but if the populace of Newfoundland and, say, a good portion of Canadians are indoctrinated by CNN or Rachel Maddow on MSNBC or Joy Reid on MSNBC, I can't help but think they would believe that Trump is a Hitler.
But let's drop the Hitler stuff, because I don't even make those references. I don't think the Hitler reference is helpful regardless of what politician we're talking about.
Exactly.
The problem here in Canada, well, I don't know what the problem, but the circumstances are, is that Fox is part of some premium package that is not offered with the general. So when you go to a hotel, 99 times out of 100, hotels will pick up the base package because it's extremely expensive. And so to pass along premium packages, which will include the HBOs and Crave and Fox and other channels that people would like to have, the hotels simply don't have them. It's as fundamental as that.
No, I would disagree with you. I know with my Eastlink here, when I got my cable, I immediately called them up and said, "Hey, I don't have this or that," and they immediately changed it at zero cost to me.
Yeah, but at Rogers or Bell, I can guarantee you that's the case, because I'm actually a consumer and a customer, and I just had to stay in a hotel this past weekend, and I asked about the cable, and it was the base of the base package that is even possible. So even when you looked at the guide that gave me the TV listings for whatever shows, I couldn't avail of 65% of them, because they weren't even part of that base package. But when you talk about indoctrination, look, I don't watch cable news. I find it to be dreadful for the most part, and every single channel has its built-in bias. It's not hard to tell. And, you know, now that we pay, advertising has taken over the so-called 6 o'clock or the 10 o'clock news, and that changed the nature of news and news broadcasting and the way the stories are covered and then disseminated for the viewing or the listening public. But when you talk about indoctrination, isn't that also part and parcel with the business model at Fox?
Excuse me, the business model where?
At Fox.
Oh yes, that's what I prefaced by saying that neither one is the Bible truth. But you know, you can't have two stations which are, you know, not at all the most popular stations in the United States, giving you all the information. But I don't want to dwell on just the cable aspect. I mean, the only thing, and I don't think it's stressed enough, is I'm not and I think a good part of the people are not, you know, indoctrinated by Trump and would like to maybe see another candidate. But you know, there is a movement, and I think it's legitimate. Is let's have a common sense approach to politics. In other words, should we have a border that's like this? Would Canada have a border like we have? Law and order. You know, would Canada allow all the district attorneys, so many of them, to allow, you know, repeat offenders up to 20 times released? You know, it's you know, and then foreign policy, you know, things like that, the Iranian policy, you know, to many people, it comes down to common sense. But anyway, I don't want to stress on that point. But you know, just not to view the situation as far as on the right or the alternative. It's more or less a common sense approach, and it's against the policies of President Biden, not the one extreme or the other. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, and I've always found that to be true. And I wish it was more activity in the middle of the United States and probably even in Canada. But the other point is, and I heard a gentleman talking about the health care, and you alluded to the fact that, so much money is being spent on the health care. I wonder where it goes. And I'm sure you brought this up, but just to reiterate it and to emphasize it, it's the demographic problem not only here, but globally, in Japan, in Western Europe, in the United States. The wait time to see a GP, a general practitioner, is going up and up, not only here, but in the United States and elsewhere, and it's because of a gray power problem.
Well, I mean, you mentioned other cultures, other jurisdictions. By no means is Canada's healthcare system working the way that it was initially intended to work, for a variety of reasons. We do much more in the way of reacting versus some preventative medicine, I would suggest. Plus, you add in some of the obvious contributing factors, whether it be age and or sedentary lifestyle and or diet. I mean, whether people want to hear it or not, in the first world, it's a lot of gluttony is a big part of our culture. And then you look at other cultures who are so much more healthy, whether it be based on diet, whether it be based on cultural traditions. It's just not the way it is in North America, for instance. I mean, it's maybe a little bit different in Western Europe, but North America, we've got ourselves a built-in health crisis. Add in the fact our reliance on prescription drugs is wild, specifically and particularly in the United States. I mean, a big percentage of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs and things like that are prescribed to Americans. I don't know why that is, whether it's a pill-pushing sort of industry and the power of the lobbyists from the big pharmaceutical companies on Capitol Hill and other governors' mansions and what have you, but we've got ourselves a North American-built problem here.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I mean, for example, in the United States, I go to see some of my doctors. Number one, some doctors are no longer accepting Medicare, And number two, the government is pressing down so much on what's rebated to the physician that it's at the point where they're saying, hey, I'm going to have like 100 patients who are Medicare, and if I have one on regular insurance, the 100 is an exaggeration, but let's say 20 patients, and it equals the same thing that I get from one, person who is working as regular insurance. It's a problem, and it's going to only grow as there's more and more elderly people, and less new children coming along, but that's a bigger problem than you or I can resolve. But I just wanted to emphasize one again, and emphasize that the gratitude I have for being up here, and what I have is in many ways the most beautiful spot in the world, I think. And number two, just a quick comment on the health care. I had a situation where I could not walk during Igor. And I was up here, and I knew I had to get an operation. But I went up to one of the healthcare places, and a wonderful doctor treated me. And he prescribed me 2 shots of fentanyl. And anyway, I was able to, I had a degree of mobility. I went back to my hospital for special surgery, and all the doctors said the treatment that I was given up here was exactly what they would do, and the job was done. So for that, I was, in addition, very grateful. So just those points to pass on, and I don't want to sound like a right-wing complainer, which I'm not, but just a few issues that I think kind of push both sides a little bit more to the middle.
I appreciate you making time, John. Thanks for the call.
You got it. Take care, Patty.
You too.
Thanks here.
All the best. Bye-bye. All right, let's take our final break of the morning. When we come back, still a segment of the show for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Someone forwarded me a news story that was in the media this morning that I read, and I actually printed it out for reference and maybe get to it today, and so let's do it. And it's a difficult, if not a traumatic or an emotional conversation. It's regarding medical assistance in dying. So there's a lady here locally. She was an advocate for exactly that. Her name is Magda Moyes. They're involved in the arts community as well, but of course she was talking about the need for there to be some attention given to it by the province and the federal government to allow for it. And in many circumstances, when the diagnosis is dire and the prognosis is clear, that for folks who are going to live in eternal and persistent chronic pain, and their demise is right around the corner, the option to, in consultation with your family and in consultation through the process with doctors, is if it's right for you and your family to be able to get medical assistance in dying. The problem has very clearly become how it's used in this country. We've heard examples where people have very basic needs, where all they needed, for instance, was additional hours of home care support. There was 2 specific stories came from the province of Manitoba, but exactly that was the case. These 2 ladies, and they weren't related to each other, they weren't overlapping their stories, it just so happened to have very similar feelings when it was printed, is if just giving people the supports they need, as opposed to, if we don't give them the support, then the next thing on their list of options is medical assistance in dying. And I know it's a tricky conversation. We've also heard stories, for instance, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, veterans. They go in to try to navigate the paper warfare. They need some additional help. And one of the first things offered is, have you considered MAID? That's not what it was created for. We've completely misused it. And now what's led to that is part of the political discourse is, that the government is trying to kill everybody off by offering them MAID. The problem is that we've left way too many grey areas available. And for folks who are on the front lines, and I know that they're under siege and the pressure is real, and they know that they might be not able to give you an answer about additional support and or treatments or whatever the case may be, and so consequently this belongs in the conversation, it seeps into the conversation long before it realistically should. So that story, and my condolences to the Moyes family, but the headline was really quite clear. MAID advocate chooses MAID at end of life. And so I know that that's not something that people really want to have in the public airwaves because it is emotional and traumatic and a little bit morbid, but it's the reality of life. At some point, we're all going to have to face those types of decisions based on whatever diagnosis and prognosis, which leads us back to the issue regarding Minister Hogan. I get lots of emails about it, but very few telephone calls about it on air. And again, I'll go back to what I thought was really probably the best question being asked of this decision, was if John Hogan has the time and the ability and the support to be able to manage all that he's responsible for, which is a lot, then as opposed to asking whether or not Minister Hogan can do it, and that would be the additional tag of being the interim healthcare minister, in addition to Justice and Public Safety, in addition to Government House Leader, in addition to the Attorney General, in addition to be the minister responsible for the Privacy Commissioner, is why are we asking him to do it? And when, how long will the interim tag last? It's just sort of a strange one. Of course, opposition parties will pick up on the obvious, right? They'll say things like, does the Premier not have any faith in anyone in the back benches that might be able to move into another portfolio and Minister Hogan shuffle over to health on a full-time basis and just health and community services as opposed to additional portfolios? I mean, we see it all the time. Ministers will be responsible for Service NL and Digital NL and Francophone Affairs. And you see those types of responsibilities get shared around. But when we talk about those busiest of all portfolios with huge implications and big policy discussions ongoing and navigating what might be considered a crisis in one corner or another, it does seem like an awful lot to put on the table. Now, we didn't get any real specific reference to it, and maybe because some people are just sort of eye-rolling the conversation at this moment of time. It's not about recreational food fishery. It's, once again, there are, I think, lots of things that are yet to consider about the DFO, federal government decision, about moving away from the stewardship fishery into the commercial fishery. It has lots of different moving parts, and we can talk about the fact that the inshore was in large part responsible for massaging the stock back to a place where it is a bit more stable, and it has potential for expanded total allowable catch. But let's remember, DFO has also said that the move from critical to cautious didn't put any more fish in the water. Right, they just changed the date with which we gather information from 1983 to 1954. So it didn't change much. DFO's also told us that there hasn't been any substantial growth in the northern cod stock since 2016. Then add to it the fact that there's been a long-running agreement, first struck in 1979 in Corner Brook, reiterated in 1982, 85, 87, and on down the line to 2015 when the Prime Minister reiterated that the first 115,000 tonne would go to the inshore. Now, of course, that felt like probably a very easy commitment to make back then because it didn't look like there was any time in the near or medium term when the total allowable catch would approach anywhere near 115,000 tonne. So it probably felt like a safe commitment because probably nothing was going to change. But then through the clamoring, whether it be for inshore, offshore, because everybody, regardless of the size of the vessel they fished in, regardless of what zone they fished in, people were asking for an increase of the catch. They talk about the exploitation rate is really quite low, and consequently we can see an increase. But in this case, Church Rogers, the Liberal Member of Parliament for Bonavista, Buren, Trinity, talking about huge opportunities, calls it a right decision, talk about the balanced approach. When no one can take me beyond just the right decision. Right decision based on what? The huge opportunity. Huge opportunity based on what and for who? Because the meager 5,000 additional tonne isn't a huge opportunity for anybody. Even if the inshore does get 84%, you spread around the tack amongst that 84%, and boy, it's not a whole lot more fish coming in their nets. Not a whole lot more fish going to be processed on shore. And then, of course, it's the whole complication of NAFO obligations and up and down the line. All right, let's check in on the Twitter feed. We're VOCM Open Line, you know what to do. Here's a question from a listener. She says, I feel so sad for the lady who lost her daughter and is struggling with the cost. Do we know why cremation is so expensive here? My aunt passed in January in Alberta and the CPP death benefit was enough to cover the cost, but it's $7,000 here. And that's through just a bit of reading I've done. Average cost of end-of-life ceremony, burial, cremation, whatever the case may be, $7,778. Why you're able to cover funeral costs in Alberta, in this case, so says this particular listener, was covered in its entirety with the CPP death benefit of $2,500? Excellent question, and I wish I had an answer for it. But, I offered that suggestion to that listener. She said it wasn't, her daughter wasn't eligible because she had never worked, because that's the trick. You don't have to be 65 years of age or older and actually collecting your CPP. If you have been a CPP contributor, then you are eligible for that death benefit. And then, of course, If $2,500 hasn't changed in quite a long time, the provincial subsidy of $2,338 has not changed recently, or certainly hasn't changed for quite a long time, then of course the numbers just don't add up. All right, email address is openline@voacm.com. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands who support the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer David Williams, I'm your host Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.